Hello and welcome to First Geek 411 Book Club. You can find us on all the socials at One Geek 411 and our PlayStation community. Join us over on our Discord server to chat about all things geeky. You can email us at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. And don't forget to watch us live every Monday on Twitch at 6:45 Mountain Time. And you can also find us on YouTube and rate and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Shanine, and I am joined by Cameron
Hello.
and Chris
Oi!
and Emma.
Heyo.
And we're talking The Legend of Sleepy Hollow by Washington Irving. In this story, we follow Ichabod Crane, a school teacher in a nice quiet valley who is a rival with Brom Bone as they compete for the hand of the flirtatious Katrina von Tassel. This is not a love story, though. This takes place in Sleepy Hollow, where ghosts abound. And not just any ghosts. Allow me to quote at you.
Quote at us, Janine. Quote at us.
Go for it.
Thank you.
I'm ready.
Thank you. The dominant spirit, however, that haunts this enchanted region and seems to be commander-in-chief of all the powers of the air is the apparition of a figure on horseback without a head. It is said by some to be the ghost of a Hessian trooper whose head had been carried away by a cannonball in some nameless battle during the Revolutionary War, and who is ever and anon seen by the country folk hurrying along in the gloom of night, as if on the wings of the wind. Such is the general purport of this legendary superstition, which has furnished materials for many a wild story in that region of shadows, and the specter is known at all the country firesides by the name of the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow.
And because someone asked it in chat, for those that don't know, a Hessian is a German mercenary soldier.
Yeah.
Fought on the side of the Britons during the Revolutionary War.
Which I learned through lore.
They are not good people.
Long story short.
Yeah.
Maybe I did too.
Facts. Alrighty. Let's get into it then. Our first question is a bit of a two-parter. 1, have you read this book before? And 2, what did you know or remember about the story before reading it this time?
So for me, yes, I have read this story before, and I remembered more than was even in the story. Because it was like that compounding lore situation where obviously this is a very short story, and obviously with like modern interpretations, like there's modern takes. So like my brain just combined it all together, and it's like, oh, this wasn't actually in the book. Oops.
For me, I had read it a long time ago. And like maybe like in middle school or something like that. And I remembered most of it. Obviously, there's like specific details and stuff like that that I didn't remember. But in terms of like general plot point, I remembered most of it.
Self have never read it before, and beforehand could not have even made the connection between the story and the Headless Horseman. So I was just completely clueless. I had heard of it, but the most exposure I had to it was the Disney take when I was like 8, and that was it. So this was my first proper exposure to the legend of Sleepy Hollow, and I quite enjoyed it. So
Nice. Yeah, I had forgotten that I had read it before, but it turns out I have. And yeah, kind of like Chris, like I've seen various interpretations and they all just kind of blend together into one, I always expect there to be like way more headless horsemen than there
Mhm.
is.
Exactly. That was like one of my biggest things. I was like, oh, he's a very small part of the story.
Right.
Yeah.
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 And I'll say that's definitely one of the things that, like, one of like the specific details I didn't remember.
Mhm.
Like I definitely thought, like we'll get more into the plot, but I definitely thought that the headless horseman specifically, like, had been haunting Ichabod a lot longer than
Yeah.
than what he shows up for in the book, or a lot
Well,
more
and-
times, or things
yeah.
like that.
Especially for like a short story that's classified under like scary or horror to some extent, you would expect there to be more of the haunter, if you
Mhm.
will, the source of the scariness to be in that short story. But really, like the Headless Horseman is talked about, but he doesn't really show up until the last what 3 to 4 pages,
Pretty
if
much.
you will.
Also, like for some reason, like I remember like other people disappearing, but that never happens.
Yep.
And it also feels like most of the other stories relating to him like throughout the story are just made up. Like as
Yeah.
a result, it's like
Yeah.
it's like, oh, this is just a common story. Well, oh yeah, I saw him the other night, kind of situation. Like when they're talking about him, it's like, sure you did.
It's more like people showing off their peacock feathers than
Right.
anything.
So oh yeah, I raced him.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, okay.
On my big old steed
And I
that's
beat him too.
buff. And only I can handle. Yeah, please.
Shout out to Greg for that first question. I guess, what was your favorite part, or a part that stands out to you?
For me, one that got me laughing actually was right towards the beginning. Just the general description of Ichabod was like some of the sort of details that they go into, it just had me laughing because my favorite quote is in that section, so I won't share that until we get into that part. But I just that specifically, the whole description of Ichabod at the start was hilarious, because he's like a scarecrow standing out in a field or something.
Mhm.
So it was just a great depiction that really got you thinking about who the main focus is.
Similarly for me, I really like the description and kind of the battle between Ichabod and Brahm.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this will come up more a bit later on, but I like that it's kind of the stereotypical brains versus brawn,
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mhm.
but it's also not. Like, that's also not what's going on either. And so I just think that that's very interesting, and I enjoyed that side of the story.
I like Ichabod and food.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm just throwing that out there. Like like when Ichabod approaches food, I love those descriptions. I'm like,
Yeah.
I can relate. I can relate.
Yeah. Yeah. I'll try a little bit of everything.
It's like, oh,
And
that-
I mean everything.
I saw the spread of food at her farm, and I fell in love with her. It's like,
Yeah.
it's like, wait, what? What just happened?
Yeah.
You fell in love with her, but you really fell in love with her food, is what you're saying.
Well, ultimately, like in terms of the story, he falls in love with the idea of being well off enough that he could eat like that, like nightly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, understandable.
If only we could all be there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I liked the final, I guess, ghost chase between Ichabod and the Headless Horseman. Definitely the most like action-packed part of the story. But just everything leading up to it, like, oh, he saw something white in the tree and was convinced it was a ghost. Oh, he heard his
Yeah.
saddle rubbing and was convinced it was a ghost. I'm like,
Yeah.
It's like that
Yeah.
Also, we have to realize there's no streetlights at this time
Yeah.
period.
It's
Well,
true,
he
it's
also
very dark.
spends so much time psyching himself up
Mhm,
that when he's
mhm.
actually like walking home in the dark, it's all mental. He's just scaring himself more than anything else because he's psyching himself up through reading these books about witchcraft and things.
I know it reminds me of the times that like me and my friends would watch horror movies or go to haunted houses, and then we just try and see who could freak each other out the most afterwards.
Yeah.
And like you're not really scared of anything, but you're just like so scared at the same time.
Yeah.
One of the things I really liked, and now I can't remember the name of it, but there's a mention of him, of Ichabod having a book. I think from Trevor Mathers. He's one of the guys that was one of the judges in the Salem witch trials.
Yes, the book on.
Oh.
Yes, and I forget
Mhm.
the actual name. I'm trying to Cotton Mathers maybe, or maybe that's the son. I don't remember. The Mather family, and they were like real people in the Salem witch trial, and like actually like wrote. I think that the book they mention is a real book.
Yes, Cotton Mather's History of New England Witchcraft.
Yes, that one. And so like that's like a real thing. And so I thought that it like and would definitely for someone like Ichabod, like who to what Emma was saying, like very much psychs himself up. Like it's
Yeah.
definitely makes so much sense that he would have this book. He would be super invested in this lore. He would see witches around every corner.
Mm-hmm.
And I just loved that little detail and like that shout out to real like New England history.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, also it like cites him like he would regularly go out and spend time in the dark to psych himself up too, like just experiencing it and like
Yeah.
as a result, like not only that, bringing stories from his original life in Connecticut too to do so, like that was his contributions because he hadn't actually interacted with the headless horseman until till later. So like he's like, oh, you guys are talking about the headless horseman. Let me tell about you some of my stories from Connecticut. It's like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Can we talk about
Yeah.
his horse, Gunpowder?
I love the name Gunpowder.
Poor Gunpowder.
That is actually honestly a great name for a horse,
It is.
especially for me being like an animal person. If you have what is incorrectly named a wild horse because it's technically feral, it is a great name for a feral horse. And my guess is Gunpowder was probably a feral horse before he became a ranch hand, essentially. Hence the reason he probably got the name Gunpowder, because they can be super.
I just
Crazy.
like that it's like this old horse. Like,
Yeah.
like probably should have been put
That
down.
too.
Probably well beyond its prime.
Yeah.
And just like, oh, by the way, so we're just gonna like in the story, it's like we're gonna build up his rival, give his rival this awesome horse, and then here comes Ichabod on a borrowed horse that's well past its prime.
Yeah.
But also like
Gunpowder
throws
is
in
the real
like these,
MVP though.
I mean,
like-
it's true.
As we go
Yeah.
into like, I mean, like it's a couple questions down, but favorite character. I mean,
Gunpowder.
Gunpowder. At least up there. Like,
Of the like 4 choices you have in the entire
Right.
story.
All right. Any least favorite parts?
we kind of hit it on at the beginning, but there not being more headless horsemen.
Yeah.
Like that was really like it's. I mean,
Could have
with it
done with
being-
more headless horsemen.
Yeah, like with it being so short, like it's kind of hard to have a least favorite part, especially like
Yeah.
compared to like last month when we did Sherlock, and it was very
Mhm.
easy to have a least favorite of those short stories.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
True.
it's very hard because it's kind of just the story that just tells its story and then it's done. And
Yeah.
like,
It
Well,
doesn't
there's-
drag it on too long.
Yeah.
Also, some very unnecessary things in this too. It's like
There are.
let's
like,
describe the schoolhouse and the locking
yeah.
mechanisms.
Or
This
he
random
spends like
fact-
2 paragraphs talking about birds. And
Yeah.
then 3 pages later, he spends another 2 paragraphs talking about birds.
It's just like, okay, it's like, are these birds relevant?
No.
Is
Not
the
in the
fact that
slightest.
a thief can break into the schoolhouse but might not be able to find his way out relevant? Because nothing ever happens regarding that. So
I mean, I think those things' main purpose would be to like establish the historicity of it
Mhm.
all. like, this is a true story because look at all these boring everyday facts that I can tell you about this
Yeah.
place.
That is fictional.
But it's real.
Well, after the story came out, yeah, the town renamed themselves Sleepy Hollow.
And to be fair, based on
Therefore,
what I
they
was
are
reading,
officially
the
real.
region was Sleepy Hollow before.
Oh, that I mean, true.
And that's and
Yeah.
then I looked that up after you mentioned that, Chris, and they renamed themselves Sleepy Hollow in 1990s.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not like right after this story. It's like 100 and
After it
something
became
years.
They're like, oh, let's do this
Popular
now.
with the
yeah.
current youths.
Yeah. I was shocked that it was that long.
It was like
the book
after
came
like
out.
the media interpretation. So after we had movies and stuff about the
Mhm.
book.
That's funny.
But yeah, it's just like a random fact about the schoolhouse. It's like okay, it'd be great if someone like broke in and couldn't get themselves out, and like it was discovered like it was a piece of Ichabod being thinking he's haunted, but it just turned out someone broke into the schoolhouse and couldn't get out.
Yeah. The image that I got in my head with the schoolhouse actually was those old raccoon traps where it's literally you stick something shiny in it, and literally the way the trap works is they see it and go, ooh, shiny. They stick their hand in to grab it, and when they make the fist, they can't pull their fist back out again. But if they
Mhm.
let go of the shiny thing, they can get out. But because they're raccoons, they don't let go of the shiny thing.
Mhm.
So the whole time I was reading this and the schoolhouse came up, I just got images in my head of Ichabod teaching raccoons, of all things.
Isn't it mentioned that Brahm and his crew like would break into the schoolhouse and rearrange stuff in
Yeah.
Ichabod's classroom?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
But then
so,
it
like-
specifically says they got out.
Right. Like
Yeah.
that's kind of like to those details. It's like, I mean, it kind of again gets to that idea of like brains versus bronze, where Ichabod just isn't that smart. But like, so he's like making these traps, and then like Brahm and his people are just like walking in and being like, okay, like
We can just shove the door down if we want
Yeah.
to.
Yeah.
So I mean, like probably the best part about this book is like all the added lore that's been added to it to complete the story, more so than the story itself.
I love this story.
I mean, like I
Yeah.
really enjoyed it for the most part, but it's just like because I mean, fortunately, it wasn't like a full novel where you wasted a ton of time talking about things like that just to get to one chapter of the Headless Horseman. So that's fine.
Yeah.
So I mean, like all in all, the Headless Horseman is a big part of it because of the length of the
Mhm.
story in general. But if it was longer, it would definitely be like,
Okay.
why?
You might as well just name the book Ichabod Crane.
Yeah.
Just wants to
Okay.
eat.
So back to Gunpowder. Who is your favorite and least favorite characters?
I mean, yeah,
Gunpowder.
like as like a Gunpowder is like the real MVP. Like just
Yeah.
putting in the work, like no appreciation.
And he didn't die that night, which is crazy for an older horse.
Yeah.
Like I'm surprised it just like that wasn't part of the story that the scare caused the horse to have a heart attack and die.
Yeah. um,
He just goes home after losing its rider. He's like, whatever.
Yeah.
I really like Brahm and his gang like playing pranks on Ichabod.
And the whole town is just like, whatever.
Yeah, like nothing
Who
happens here
cares
anyway.
if
Like,
the local teacher is being terrorized by this gang of misfits?
Yeah, Brahm
Brahm-
is one of my favorites too. Like he's kind of a knucklehead and brawny, but like it says he's generally well liked and is like
Yeah.
mostly a decent person. And I'm like, yeah,
Kind of like
just like, you know, a farm boy, he's nice, playing some pranks.
yeah.
Yeah. His character reminded me of like Gaston.
A little,
Yeah.
A little bit.
I was
like not
thinking,
as douchey, not
Yeah,
as
but, like,
far as
Yeah.
Gaston,
Yeah.
Right.
but like
Like if you take a stone and combine him with what's his name from The Princess Bride? Fezzik? Andre.
Well, yeah, is that Fezzik?
I think
I think
Fezzik's a
so.
character, and then
Yeah.
Andre the Giant.
Yeah.
played him,
Andre the
yeah.
Giant's.
So if you take those two and combine them together,
Mhm.
then I feel like you would get this guy right here.
It's like, no, I'll wait. Yeah, I would agree. Like, I mean, I like what he brought, and definitely more of an appealing character in a sense. Granted, definitely like that jockish kind of popular character that just gets away with stuff.
Yeah.
Don't care for
Yeah.
that aspect of
Mm-mm.
him.
Right, but this
Um,
kind of ties into my least favorite character, Ichabod Crane. Like he's just so easy not to like.
Yeah.
And like you kind of like that's kind of why I identify with Abram is it's just like you kind of want to just prank Ichabod. Like
Yeah.
not hurt him by
Yeah.
any means. But
Well,
like,
and
there's that he just kind of needs to like
Ichabod is kind of like that person in real life who's like obviously smart, but he's so smart that he can be super sneaky about the things that he's doing, and you know he's doing whatever bad is going on, but you can't prove it to anyone else.
Yeah, Ichabod is just so like full of himself.
Mhm.
And I think there was the one part where it talks about like he wants to marry Katrina and be like super wealthy and stuff so that he wouldn't have to be friends with the local school teacher. And I'm like, you jerk.
yeah.
Yeah.
Like you think you're so much better than everyone and like
but Ichabod redeemed himself in his love for food. Come on.
Yeah. Chris's
that-
love of
that-
anime is showing here. Like he just wants a main character that'll eat a bunch of ramen. That's really all he wants.
Yeah.
That's all I need. It's like I'll ignore all your other faults if you
Just
love
because you
food.
love food.
Just because you love food, because that's a great motivator in life. But yes, Ichabod is a terrible character otherwise. Which is so different than like my like concept of him, like in general, like through the modern interpretations or like through the movies and everything. He's actually pretty decently smart and everything else, or in his modern portrayals in the movies, in every other take that I remember, at least, for the most part.
Again,
And-
where the main character's personality in the original source is different
oh,
Mhm.
definitely for
from
sure.
the personality that the media makes it out to be.
Yeah.
See the entire conversation we had about it at last month's book club concerning
Right.
Sherlock.
Right. But I mean, in general, and like also obviously we put Ichabod in a modern role too, like there's the TV series, Sleepy Hollow, right? Is it called Sleepy Hollow? I don't remember.
I think so, yeah.
Where essentially like it's a continuation literally of the modern story where he got spirited away but ends up in modern times.
Mm. I haven't seen it, so
I gave it a
I
shot.
can give no input.
I
on-
went back and watched it because there's like a crossover with another show. So I went back and I was like, sorry, it's like, oh, this is an interesting concept, but definitely like goes more into the deeper lore or the reasoning behind and things like that. Like there is no witch tree in Sleepy Hollow, but it's in like every other portrayal as like the explanation for the Headless Horseman.
Mhm.
And for some reason, like obviously my memory says that's in the story, but it's not.
There's a tree that is mentioned,
Mhm.
but
A tree, right?
I feel like the illustrations that were included in my book kind of look like how the tree is in modern interpretations, especially the Tim Burton one. Like it's like they took it right out of the book illustration wise.
But yeah, he's a terrible character.
Yeah.
Especially because his motivation for falling in love, I'm like, that really hurts me. It's like, yeah, you're gonna make a great husband. Also, he's very proud of his singing.
yeah.
Yeah.
Also, hype that we didn't have him sing. Like that's not like a plot point. He
Right.
doesn't like try to like sing his way out of the horsemen attacking him or anything like
Yeah.
that. I was
Maybe
like,
that'd make it more interesting though if he did.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that might make him a little better.
Even if it did fail, it would make him a little bit better.
It's like playing to your strengths. That's at least a smart thing to do. in any situation.
While we're on characters, shout out to Katrina's parents. I have a quote here to read about them because it just encapsulates them so well. Balt Van Tassel was an easy, indulgent soul. He loved his daughter better even than his pipe, and like a reasonable man and an excellent father, let her have her way in everything. His notable little wife, too, had enough to do to attend to her housekeeping and manage her poultry. For, as she sagely observed, ducks and geese are foolish things and must be looked after, but girls can take care of themselves.
Yeah.
I really like
Solid
that quote.
parenting right there for an 18-year-old.
I really like the mom
Yeah.
in that situation.
Yeah.
Too. It's like I gotta take care of the geese and hens. You're
Go deal
older
with
than-
yourself.
You figure it out. I ain't got time for this. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Her dad liked her even better than his pipe. Oh,
I hope so.
good.
Yeah.
There's also
Gotta
so
get
many
those priorities
things.
straight.
Real close, kind of a toss up from day to day.
Right. And it's very obviously this book was written at another time. Just by
Yeah.
some of the descriptions and things, you're like, whoa.
I mean, it's not as bad as Sherlock, to throw back to our again. to
I
our
mean,
previous
true.
book club.
Very
Yeah.
true.
And like, at least for this one, and I think a lot of the time it came across more as like a commentary or like satire.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like to this point with the pipe, like it seems like this is more trying to be like it's a problem that this has to be said versus Sherlock, where he's just like, no, women are the weaker sex, and it's just like, dude,
No, we
Mm.
ain't. Please.
Yeah. It's like because like Katrina's character is just being free and like doing her thing. She's not portrayed as necessarily an object while the characters are written to treat her like one.
Mm-hmm.
Her portrayal itself is not the subject of being objectified necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
It's like the guys, treat her that way in their rivalry to compete for her love and affection, or just realizing that you're in love with her because you can inherit the farm type of situations. So that's a fault on the male characters, not
and is that said for Brom? Like, do we ever get his? Because I know that's very much
no,
Ichabod's,
that's definitely we don't
yeah.
really. It doesn't really tell us much about
Right.
like
Mm-mm.
because
on
like
Brahm's interest in her.
right, and I think because of that, the reason I asked that was I wasn't sure if I missed it since I did do the audiobook, and so like, and I think that's part of the reason. Go back to favorite and least favorite characters. I kind of liked Brahm is like since we don't get he like his interest just seems more genuine. Like he seems much more like he's like almost like humoring, like he and Katrina are like humoring Ichabod.
Well, I feel like so like there is a portion in the story where Katrina seems to be humoring Brahm to ward off unwanted. Like
Oh,
she
true.
obviously favors Ichabod in a sense, probably
Mhm.
just access and because it spends more time with him. It seems like,
Mhm.
although it's like Ichabod weasels his way into her life.
Yeah.
Through school and singing. And then she doesn't decline on Brahm, but keeps him around because it mentions that to kind of ward off unwanted solicitors.
All the other men.
Yep, all the other men because they don't want to compete with Brahm. But
No.
Ichabod's like, psh.
Please.
I do like that about Ichabod is that he's like, I'm not gonna let someone else deter me unless she tells me otherwise, kind of situation. But yeah, and then eventually, obviously, toward the end, after Ichabod disappears, she's ends up with Brahm anyway.
Yeah, I feel like Katrina is a little bit like Angela, where she's like, yeah, Dwight and Andy can duel for me. We'll see what happens.
Pretty much.
I have had two men fight over me before.
Yeah.
But then that might just be like that might be more attributed to her youth than just her personality. It's like I mean, I guess I don't know. 18 in the time period of this book, maybe not so much, but
Yeah. I mean,
I
I
think
feel
she's
like-
a little bit spoiled and likes the
Yeah.
attention.
oh, for sure.
yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. At least from my standpoint, even today, having two men fight over me would be absolutely terrifying. Just in my humble
I
opinion.
mean, I'd gladly take two women fighting over me.
Yeah. Well, that's because you're a man. We have to worry about walking down the street in the dark. Thank you very much.
I mean, true.
It's a very different story.
But I mean, like it would be like it's two men you know in a fairly safe setting,
Fair
vying for
enough.
your attention, not two men stalking you in the dark down an alley.
Fair enough.
Or it would be you with one of the men and the other man stalking y'all down an alley.
I mean, that's true. Too. That might be a little closer.
Yeah.
How dare you
Second
friend
man
zone me?
is Ichabod.
I will not partake in a love triangle.
Oh man, we've
Too
gone off the
late.
rails.
Okay, so on the first page of The Legend of Sleepy Hollow, it says that this story is found among the papers of the late Diedrich Knickerbocker. What does everyone think of the narrator, Diedrich Knickerbocker?
I think he's trying very hard not to share his opinions, and he occasionally fails.
Yes.
It's accurate, I think.
I mean,
I liked the narrator quite a bit.
yeah,
I think it was a good way of telling the story where, like, again, you kind of get into that idea of satire where,
Yeah.
like, he's telling this story and he's very much presenting it as a true story and just kind of like, look at how ridiculous these people are. Like, that kind of thing. And so I really enjoyed that. I thought that was a good way of giving us more information on the town without making Ichabod our point of view character as we learn new things.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I was looking some stuff up, and it says that Washington Irving uses this persona of Diedrich Knickerbocker quite often as a chronicler of Dutch history. So it's kind of used to like establish it as a true story.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting.
also these anglicized Dutch names get me.
Mm-hmm.
Knickerbocker. Oh, you're one of the Knickerbockers.
Ah, you're one of them folks.
But I like him. I like that because he's human in the fact that like he obviously has certain favoritism, but presents information in his descriptions in general without like just blatantly providing his opinion or of a person or situation. But it's kind of just infused with how like the things he chooses to describe about people, like
Mhm.
Ichabod or like Brahm. Like it's like obviously there's opinion there because those are the things that you are trying to put forth in your description of them. While it doesn't necessarily tell the whole picture, it's just your opinion of that person. But
Your
without saying this
perception of
person's
them.
dumb.
So in the epilogue, it describes a scene where Knickerbocker has heard the story from an unnamed storyteller, and he conjectures about who the storyteller could be.
It's Ichabod Crane.
Either the storyteller is Ichabod Crane, or there is, at least in my version, a third guy in that epilogue who like asked the storyteller about it or about the moral, and that guy's Ichabod Crane, and he's just sitting there like, I was there, and this story you're telling is only 1/3 true. So
Yeah, I kind of took it as being like not necessarily like Brahm and Katrina's kids, but kind of being the story that like their kids would tell on the schoolyard, and then this person who didn't believe it because they just assumed kids were like exaggerated, like that kind of thing.
mm-hmm.
Where it's like the town legend as told through like a young kid, that kind of thing.
Yeah. When I was a kid at the school I went to, there was this on the like playground field, there was this old metal box in one corner that I think had electrical equipment in it at one point. But the story at the school was that there was a almost like a Bloody Mary, but like an old lady ghost who lived inside the box in the corner of the field. So that was like our Headless Horseman at the school, was that the old metal box in the corner of the field was haunted. And it got passed down from 5th graders to 4th graders and so on. So I don't know why I just thought of that, but relevant.
Samara. I mean, similarly, like just my initial grade elementary school, there's like the original like old schoolhouse building on the same property that's just used for storage. That's mostly boarded up. So there's always lore and stories going around about that place, especially when there's bats flying out of it. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Always make up stories about that place.
Freaking bats. I love
And
Hopley.
get sent to the principal's office for trying to pull off boards. Want in? Let me in.
Look at all these chickens.
All right. If you could hear this story from another point of view, whose would you choose?
Brahm. Or whatever his name is.
Mhm.
Is it Brahm? I
It's
should know
Brahm.
this.
The local
Yeah.
school teacher Ichabod's trying to avoid.
Yeah.
Because it's like because I want that perspective to be like, well, Ichabod, you're not so great yourself. Look at all this crap I have to put up with.
Don't be so hot hoity-toity. You haven't gotten there yet.
I think Katrina would be really interesting.
Yeah.
To hear her side of, like, especially in that sense of like with the end where it's implied that Brahm is the headless horseman.
Yeah.
Like by implied, I mean, basically said, but not exactly like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like I'd be really interested to hear like what she knew about it, and like again, not necessarily that she was in on the whole thing, but her being like, yeah, it was Brahm. Like
I also
Yeah.
want to hear about like her final conversation with Ichabod
Yeah.
because
He left in a huff.
he left in a
He
huff,
was,
and also
he was huffy.
the narrator literally says, I can't imply to know what was talked about, since like just before that is talking about how Ichabod felt pretty sure of himself, and then this happens and it's just left in the air. I want to know what that conversation was.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, it can sort of be, you can, if you're going to take stretch it with the implication that Brahm is the headless horseman. You can sort of guess that in that conversation, she told Ichabod that she was going to marry Brahm. But again, like the narrator, you don't know for sure. So,
Gunpowder.
gunpowder. He's the real hero.
I want the personification of gunpowder as a story.
Yep.
just his portion. It's like my owner let this guy borrow me for the day, and he just kicked me like 15 times.
And he made me lose my best Sunday saddle.
Gunpowder.
It was the
MVP.
best one I
Yeah,
had.
I like how every as in the 2 book clubs we've had, we've picked a random side character
Yeah.
to become the MVP of the chat.
Yeah.
So
You know it.
Side characters are what make good
underappreciated.
stories.
Yeah.
They need their time to shine too.
They do. They really do.
Well, the
All
main
right.
character's not really shining, so.
No.
Rather dull.
yeah.
All right. Did you find the world and the characters believable?
I did like
Yeah.
enough, like especially with the fact that it's a ghost story, not a story about ghosts.
Yeah.
Like, and I think that was played really well. That's something that I think the story shines for,
Hmm.
is that and because of that, I think it's believable. Like if we wouldn't have had that time where it was implied that Brahm is the headless horseman and it was
Yeah.
left as this supernatural thing chased Ichabod away, like I think then I would find it a lot less believable.
Yeah.
But with that, it just becomes this real town where like people are. And
Yeah. I
one of
was
them
gonna-
gets easily spooked.
Yeah. I was going to say something pretty similar, and just that, like, again, it's a town in a time where courting is a thing that's super extensive, and like people will do what they must in order to win the lady's hand. And it does imply that Ram was the headless horseman, and he was doing what he could to win the lady's hand. And that was like, okay, that makes it believable in a town where there's lots of folklore.
Yeah, I think it's very like satirized and exaggerated, but like close enough to reality that you're like, yeah.
Yeah, and I can also picture it just because, you know, townships in general were smaller.
Mhm.
And being in Montana, like the way stories spread and stuff in like small towns, especially super small towns that are like more removed from like modern conveniences, it's really easy to picture like the chain of events in the story and for them to be feasible.
All right. Any favorite quotes?
Yes.
I'll just say while you're getting that, Shanine, you took mine. So I love that quote about Katrina's parents.
It's so
Like,
Yeah.
hilarious.
I think that's probably my favorite in the whole thing.
So when I was talking earlier about the description of Ichabod, I have this one highlighted, that he had hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, feet that might have served for shovels, and his whole frame most loosely hung together. But he just said hands that dangled a mile out of his sleeves, that just got me laughing, because like you can imagine, you can say that so many different ways, but Washington Irving decided to say his hands dangled a mile out of his sleeves, not just his arms were too long for his sleeves or whatever. And that just got me laughing. So
There is a point where like they're kind of explaining like some of the other ghost stories, or like kind of the hauntings of Sleepy Hollow. It's like, besides, there is no encouragement for ghosts in most of our villages, for they have scarcely had time to finish their first nap and turn themselves into their graves before their surviving friends have traveled away from the neighborhood, so that when they turn out at night to walk their rounds, they have no acquaintance left to call upon. This is perhaps the reason why we so seldom hear of ghosts except in our long-established Dutch communities. Also, just speaking to like how young these settlements are, but also that like it makes sense that something older, such as something from the Revolutionary War, may be what's causing hauntings, and that obviously everyone else here being younger hasn't had a chance to start haunting local areas. Also speaks to the perspective of how they perceived hauntings for that time period.
Yeah, another of my favorite quotes is also talking about Sleepy Hollow and their just huge belief in ghosts. Um, it is remarkable that the visionary propensity I have mentioned is not confined to the native inhabitants of the valley, but is unconsciously imbibed by everyone who resides there for a time. However wide awake they may have been before they entered that sleepy region, they are sure in a little time to inhale the witching influence of the air and begin to grow imaginative, to dream dreams and see apparitions. Um, yeah, I found it interesting how, like, it's called Sleepy Hollow and they're so often described as being sleepy. And that's a big contributor, I guess, to their belief in the supernatural.
However extensive that may be.
And I think that that's it, again with that idea of it being believable. I think that that kind of ties that idea together, that the people here want to believe ghost stories.
Yeah.
Like not just Ichabod, but the whole town. That
I
this
want to
is what
believe
they
ghost
want.
stories.
It's just a matter of how much you hype yourself up over it.
For camp, as a young life leader, I used to always bring a book of ghost stories to read to them.
Worth it.
Yeah. Especially like ones locally. It's like, it's great.
But that makes it so much more fun because it's camp.
Oh, yeah. Except for when they don't sleep.
Got him.
That's on you then.
Were they
Not
really
on them.
sleeping at Young Life Camp?
Yeah, are you really
anyways?
sleeping at camp anyway?
I wasn't. I was too busy.
You're too busy spooked by the ghost stories you read.
I was too
This
busy
is why
making sure
Chris
they were
sympathizes
behaving.
with Ichabod so much.
Yeah.
And his love for food.
Yeah.
Like when it describes him like looking at food, I'm like, I get that.
Same.
I get that.
Same.
All right. Was there anything in the book that surprised you?
Not really.
I think for me, it's stuff that we've already mentioned. It's the headless horseman not being as big of a thing, and then, and I think Chris said this at like the very beginning. It's Ichabod not being that likable. Like I very much remembered Ichabod being like, oh, the school teacher who's just trying to get the girl.
And putting Braum, like he like his character should be written in like the person that puts Braum in his place for being a brute. That's like my perception of Ichabod, but that's not him in the book by any means.
Right. Did you notice any biblical or theological themes?
So I was reading a blog post today called Fear and Darkness and the Legend of Sleepy Hollow over on
Where?
thehootenhowl.com. And
I was waiting for it. I was like, oh, that's Shanine's
I've had it
article, isn't
open
it?
this whole time, just waiting for the moment to do that exact setup. And yeah, and so I mean, shout out, go read Shanine's article. I'll drop a link in chat. And I think in that you really summarized like the biggest ones being fear, and especially that fear of the unknown, of darkness. And that kind of as a whole, one of the things it reminded me a lot of was it's kind of a journey to get there, but it's Abraham at the Red Sea, where like the Israelites are all backed up against the wall. The Egyptians are coming. Moses.
I was like,
there we go.
I was like,
Wrong one.
Wrong person.
Got there.
it's like,
I got there.
wait,
though.
I was like, when was Abram at the Red Sea? Like, I don't remember
Thank
this.
you, Oklahoma Christian.
I mean,
Moses at the Red Sea, and and the Egyptians are coming, and he's like, God, what do we do? And God just says, move, like raise your hands, part the Red Sea. You know what to do. Like, and I think that kind of that idea of fear plays into not knowing like what God wants from us, and like that's kind of that taking that idea and applying it out to other things. Like it's that fear of what could get in the way, of what could be not part of God's plan. At least that's what it is more so for me. But like I think that is at least the major theme that I identified with.
Well, I mean, in general, also like fear is a tool that gives things power that don't normally have any power.
Mhm.
Yeah. And that again goes back to Ichabod psyching himself up.
Exactly. Like he
And
gave,
like
even if it turns out to be fake, he gave a lot of his power due to fear to a story
yeah.
that was unreasonable.
Mhm.
Even if it was unknown or anything, like there's that power in that. And it's like the same for anything. Like that's why we aren't given a spirit of fear, is that because through fear we give things power. So like fear of even things that are supposed to be there to corrupt us, like so fear in the dark arts is what give them power over, or possible power over, or given dominion over those such of things if they are to exist, that we have power over them through the redemption of Christ. But
Yeah. I think I was also thinking a lot about how like fear can just grow when you leave it in the darkness. Like everything looks so much scarier in the dark.
Mhm.
Like Ichabod with random trees and stuff like
Yeah.
that. He's like, all of these are ghosts out to get me. It's like, no, it's just a tree.
It's just a tree.
weed over there.
like when your cat brings in a giant moth and you think it's a bat flying around in your room.
Yeah,
just
or
me?
that.
Just me?
Hey, my cat's brought us garter snakes, so
I mean, he's brought in a lot of things, but this one time, because he has brought a bat home once. Okay, and he brought it into my room, and it was still alive, and it flew around and had to spend.
So you actually had a bat flying around your room.
That's happened too. And then the next time, it was I thought it was a bat because it was a giant moth. It was huge, and you could hear it fluttering, and it was like, you brought in another bat. And it was a moth, a giant moth, but nonetheless, it's like, yeah. When I wake up and I hear fluttering, I'm like, I'm gonna get rabies.
Yes, so in the dark, moths can seem like bats, but we're told so many times that Jesus is the light.
And the moth is it's gonna be attracted. And so Jesus is gonna attract the moth, so you can capture it and get it away from you.
Yeah.
Yes.
Proper logic there, guys. That's how
That's how
Jesus saves.
Sure.
Jesus is the light.
Somehow we got
attracts
there.
the moth.
That you think is a bat.
That you think is a bat.
So you can get it out of your room and have a peaceful night's sleep. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Lesson learned.
All right, there you go.
This is what the
moral of
Bible does
Sleepy
not
Hollow.
tell you about how you're
Yeah.
saved.
This is First Geek 412.
Yeah.
But definitely.
You know what I'm saying.
I definitely.
Read the blog post.
Definitely read the
So we get a provided moral of the story, quote unquote, in the epilogue. What do you all think of that? I have it somewhere. Okay.
Say, can you read it?
Yeah. Yes. So the storyteller thinks that the story was intended most logically to prove that there is no situation in life but has its advantages and pleasures, provided we will but take a joke as we find it. That therefore he that runs races with goblin troopers is likely to have rough riding of it. Ergo, for a country schoolmaster to be refused the hand of a Dutch heiress is a certain step to high preferment in the state.
I liked the beginning of that.
Goblins? Me too.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I like that quote of like the one who runs from goblins is have rough riding. That part, I really liked that because like I
Yeah.
think that's like, and I guess to me that's close to the moral of the story, of like, if you spend all your time running from what you fear, you're going to spend a lot of time running.
Yeah.
And it's going to be difficult. But if you turn around and look closely in Ichabod's case, you'll realize that the thing that you're afraid of might not be that what you're afraid of. I think I said afraid a lot in that, but
Might just be your rival.
yeah.
Yeah. Any other thoughts on the moral of the story? All right. Anything else that stood out to you from the legend of Sleepy Hollow?
I want to hear some of his stories from Connecticut.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't really have anything other than what we've mentioned already.
All right. We've touched on this, but how does it compare with other pop culture representations?
Shanine, I hope you're ready.
Bring it, Cameron.
So-
I'm ready.
So, as mentioned on
And with
Monday
that, that's
episode, stream just crashes.
All right.
it's like, oh, frames are dropping. I don't know what's going on, Cameron.
oh.
As mentioned on the Monday episode, we watched the Tim Burton Sleepy Hollow. And one of the jokes that we had in our podcast host chat on our Discord is that Wednesday Cameron radically disagreed with Monday's Cameron's take on that movie. And so it was so interesting, like having at one point in time read the story, then watching that movie and being like, did I just completely make things up? And then I did the audiobook the next day on Tuesday, and I was like, oh no, the movie's just completely different. Okay. Like, just like not remotely close. And I was just like, okay, I see what you did, Tim Burton. I'm not sure why you did it, but I see what you did. Like you basically, that interpretation basically completely changes everything about the story.
Yeah.
And I was just like, oh, I kind of like it less now.
Yeah.
I mean, for like the modern take, the Tim Burton version definitely, because it's Tim Burton, dwells on the darkness of the story and wants to pose it as a reality more than
Right.
just a story. And I like how they flushed out certain details to dive into that more fantastical element of the story in the Tim Burton aspect. But I think I'm also just leaning more so at the time when that movie came out and everything. I was a big Tim Burton fan, so I think I just have this hindsight view, or like I'm just remembering it as I remembered it when I was a big Tim Burton fan.
Also, Deanna posted this in chat. Shout out to Christopher Walken as the Headless Horseman in the Tim Burton movie. He indeed was
true.
that role.
Yeah.
And I'm super upset they didn't have him do, like, he didn't say anything. Like, I mean, even once he gets his head back, like, you had Christopher Walken, but then he didn't do the thing.
Didn't have a single line. He just sort of stood there.
And just left it up for the imagination. I will also say, like, the TV series that ran from 2013 to 2017, it poses more biblical apocalypse themes as a continuation of the original story. So ultimately, obviously, it presents the Headless Horseman as probably one of the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and then continues to expand on that, like, going forward. So, I mean, I like the things that have come out of the story, and because of the way it was written, because it was left kind of open ended and things like that, there's a lot of things left that you can for that creative license when you're developing new adaptations to the story. And I like that because now you can't be so critical of modern adaptations because they aren't close to it, just because of how open ended the story itself is.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the Disney version of it. I think it really captures like the comical, satirical side of it. And I think it keeps like the mystery of the story quite well.
Mhm.
And here is the thing about the Tim Burton one. I love Dark and Twisted, and Tim Burton on paper seems like exactly the type of director that I would love, and like I should love everything that he does. And I always go in expecting it to be amazing, and then I hate it.
Mhm.
That was me with like M. Night Shyamalan.
I like M. Night Shyamalan.
I like
I
some
can't
of
do
his
Tim
stuff.
Burton though.
Yeah, there is no movie in Boston.
I just
I think Tim Burton's definitely hit or miss with the project he takes on anymore. Like looking back, so like this was like if anyone was gonna do a good Sleepy Hollow, it was gonna be Tim Burton. It just ended up maybe like in terms of at least today isn't what you would probably want from him.
No.
it's
mean, I
just so
think that-
bad.
Yeah, like to what Shanine said, I think that Tim Burton could have played more with the actual themes of the book,
Yeah.
because there's the actual like theme of witchcraft, and like in the course in the Tim Burton movie there are witches, but like I think that he could play a movie that built more on that idea of this town that is scared, and
People
There's-
psyching themselves up.
yeah, and even if there are actual witches in the town, actual witches in air quotes, like you could play into that idea of fear and make it more of a Salem-y witch trial type story where there's this fear of the headless horseman, rather than having it be like this revenge story.
A real headless horseman.
Yeah.
Also, the headless horseman in that isn't a German mercenary
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
he?
he is.
In the
Yeah.
original. Oh, is he? Oh,
Yeah.
Maybe that's why I didn't have to talk. Is like Christopher Walken was
He just
not
couldn't
gonna
do the
a German accent. I don't remember. It's been a long time since I watched that movie, and I don't plan on watching it again.
There you go.
I will not be watching it again. I don't know. I feel like
I've never
I
seen it, so I'll just keep it that way.
I love Johnny Depp, but I feel like Ichabod Crane, like on top of being unlikable, was not even interesting. And like when it's focusing around a really uninteresting main character, you're starting off on a bad foot. And there just wasn't anything to help it recover.
Okay.
And I felt like there should have been more spooks.
So
and
in
I wasn't
general, do you just
spooked at
not like
all.
Tim
I
Burton?
was just bored.
Or
Yes.
you just don't like him? So
I
you
do
don't
not
like
like Tim
Edward
Burton.
Scissorhands?
I do like Edward Scissorhands. It's not like one of my favorite movies ever, but like I enjoyed it. But like in general,
It doesn't make the top 50.
no, probably not.
Oh, I'm still a big fan of Tim Burton. Granted, I'm not saying he can't do no wrong, but
Yeah.
we can save this conversation for our post-show chat. Let's continue.
And I
with
will
Sleepy
say
Hollow,
on
but-
like modern interpretations, like I think one of the things that the Disney one did so well is that like Washington Irving's descriptions play very well into animation,
True.
and that's what
Very,
Disney
very
did
well.
so well.
Yeah.
like and of course now we're combining Tim Burton things, but like a Sleepy Hollow in the aesthetic of Nightmare Before Christmas, like that stop motion
Yeah.
like style would be really cool.
Well, and
Probably would have
that,
been
yeah.
better.
Like I mentioned earlier, the like my biggest memory of the Headless Horseman is that Disney
Mhm.
with a pumpkin head. Like that is my biggest mental image of the Headless Horseman, and I definitely agree in that if Tim Burton were to redo the movie, it would benefit more from having that stop motion
Mhm.
track of, because they can definitely do like capture that more of that whimsical feeling of a myth that is present in the book.
All right. So we have mentioned a few stories that we would like to have further explored. So would you read more stories or a longer story from this setting?
For me,
I
it's hard
would.
to say. Oh, go ahead.
Just I would. If they were all like, if he had written more short stories in this similar style, that like branched off from this main one. So like talking about where Brom, like something to do with Brom and getting married, or even gunpowder for whatever random reason. Like I would love to read those,
I
but if they were longer, then probably not.
now I'm just picking like a feature length film about gunpowder. Like it's like doggo secretariat. It's just gunpowder. That's the picture I'm. That's the movie I'm picturing right now.
It's a blockbuster.
It probably would be actually.
Yeah. So for me, it's hard to say because I think, as I said earlier, I think one of the best parts of this story is that it doesn't overstay its welcome.
Mm-hmm.
Like, not. And that being said, and we've kind of hinted on it with the headless horseman showing up more throughout the book as a possible way of doing it. Like, I do think that there could be a double or triple the length story where Ichabod is being haunted by the headless horseman. And you could do that type of story, but it's hard to say because, like I said, I think one of the benefits is how short this is, and it's a self-contained story, and it gets you the spook at the end, and then you're done.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can do more on like the style, focusing on like some of the other stories from
Yeah.
the area or the era for the most part. Um, but yeah, I definitely don't think we need more headless horsemen, and I'm not sure. You know, I'm realizing that Washington Irving himself isn't necessarily my favorite author. Like I like how short the stories were and they are easy to digest. But some of the details he focuses on, I'm just like, okay. I'm happy
All
this
right,
wasn't
well,
the length of the Lord of the Rings.
Oh boy. I would have given up very quickly if that were the case, truth be told.
well, segueing into the next question, Chris would not read more Washington Irving. What about the rest of everybody?
Greg and I were
I mean,
talking. Go ahead, Emma.
oh, I mean, it's definitely a big debate or a bit of a toss up. Like, if I were assigned more Washington Irving for like a class, I would enjoy reading it, but I wouldn't necessarily go out of my way to hunt down and find more of his stuff to read just of my own accord. Like there's other books that I have that I prefer to read first, or that I gravitate to before reading more of his stuff. Not to say that his stuff isn't enjoyable.
Right. And I think that maybe that's like my point is like I wouldn't read more because I have read more.
Yeah.
And like I mean, like, obviously, like most of us maybe bought, like, when we got Sleepy Hollow, came in a pairing with a certain other Washington Irving story. Oh man, what's it called?
Yep. Rip Van Winkle.
Rip Van Winkle. I was like, Rumpelstiltskin. That's not right.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was saying. Greg and I had a conversation, I think in the Saving the Game Discord, because he recently reread that as well. And it's one that he was saying is radically different than what you remember. And so it's one that I want to go back and at least reread that. And then I'm kind of interested in, like, I guess I'm just on Wikipedia, called the Sketchbook of Jeffrey Crayon Gent. And it's like a collection of short stories, which is where the Legend of Sleepy Hollow, I guess, is found. And so I'd kind of be interested in reading more of that. And the other like short stories that are in there, or just seeing if there's anything else that jumps out. But kind of, and that's where Rip Van Winkle is in there as well. But I'd kind of be interested in that. But other than that, not necessarily. I would read more Washington Irving if somebody said you liked the satire side of Sleepy Hollow. Here's another work that's similar. But
Yeah. My Sleepy Hollow was in a collection of Washington Irving's, not the one that you said, Chris, but just like a random, or Cameron. Sorry.
it's okay. I've messed up you also. We're even now.
Yeah. They were like fine. I didn't love them. I think Sleepy Hollow's definitely his most famous one for a reason.
I think where his legacy ties is how simple his stories were, so they're easy to tell verbal or orally. You know, so they lend to this kind of folk story-esque telling. And I think that's where like my fondness for his stories come from, is like Rip Van Winkle is a good story to tell, maybe not so good to read.
Yeah. Well, because it lends to both that and Sleepy Hollow lend to some amount of personal exaggeration without completely derailing or ruining the story. Like you can, and I mean, this just comes from working in the educational system, having to retell things like the Three Little Pigs and Snow White off the top of my head after not having read them or watched the movies in years. Like, these are good stories that you can tell off the top of your head and get most of the details and still fill in the gaps in a way that makes the story effective and entertaining for whoever you're telling it to. So it just works better and very well when you're sitting around a campfire roasting marshmallows late at night or whatever. Whenever you're
Campfire.
Yeah. Don't play with fire, kids.
Or do.
Or do, but make sure there isn't a fire ban going on.
I did, and I turned out
I
fine.
plead with you. Do not evacuate people from their homes. It is awful.
Alrighty. To wrap us up at the end of the story, the townsfolk don't know what happens to Ichabod and essentially land on who cares. An old farmer says that Ichabod left for fear of the headless horseman, as well as Hans van Ripper, whose saddle he ruined. Also gunpowder.
Also,
and embarrassment of being put off by Katrina, moved to the city, continued teaching, studied law, and became a judge. And, and the old country wives hold to the story that Ichabod was spirited away by supernatural means. And then, of course, Brombones may or may not have been involved. So, what do you think happened to Ichabod Crane?
I think he got a mighty bad concussion. That's what I think.
I think he was whisked off and put into a coma until
Yeah.
modern times.
until modern times.
And then we see his continuation in the series of Sleepy Hollow. No, I'm just kidding. I think the way it poses this question in the story is so weird to me, mostly because of the time we live in now.
Mhm.
It's like, how do you not just know that someone left your town and went off and lived this entire life, like
Yeah.
doing these other things? It's
Mhm.
like, and that
What do you
mostly
mean you
comes
don't know
that
where they went to?
that I can cyberstalk someone and find out, especially if you're doing something as extravagant as becoming a judge or something along those lines. It's like, I can Google you.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, they are alive. Okay, this is what they're doing. Perfect. Whereas, so like this idea that he did that and no one in town knows and they still think he was whisked off by the Headless Horseman is crazy to me if that's true.
Mhm.
My take is that he got scared off, went to another town, and basically married that town's equivalent of Katrina.
Yeah.
Like, because like
Just for the food.
right, like it's because it's clearly shown he doesn't actually love her. It's more about and like all the time,
Status.
like yeah, it's the status of marrying
The
her.
leisurement
Yeah,
of what he
Mhm.
would gain from that union.
exactly. And so my take was that that's what he did. He just, well, I got scared away from this place to just go to the next place, and who knows, that could even be why he left Connecticut.
Yeah.
Like he just kind of like stuff happens, he gets spooked, leaves the town, goes to the next one, etc., etc.
Or he's actually just really loves like the lore of scary stories, so he's actually traveling from town to town, getting scared off on purpose to allow this legend of something that in that town to continue carrying on. That's
To like
that's my
reinforce
opinion.
it.
Yeah, exactly. He's like, it's like, oh, they've got this talk about this as a horseman. What if we make it so someone actually disappears because of him?
Yeah.
Dun,
Because
dun,
I think we
dun.
mentioned it earlier, but there was no evidence of the headless horseman
Mhm.
before Ichabod. It was just like a story. And then Ichabod came along and suddenly someone disappears because of this guy. So that I can definitely see that working.
Nailed it.
Yeah.
Nailed it.
All right. Any final thoughts on the legend of Sleepy Hollow?
Highly recommend.
Yeah.
Like,
Good story.
yeah. Even if, like I said, I did the audiobook, it's the one I did was an hour and 40 minutes. Like,
Mm-hmm.
Which
It's
is like
very
half
easy.
an hour for you, right?
well, I did it at, yeah. you know. You live the fast life. I think I was on 1.75 for this one, but
Dang.
yeah. And so, yeah, I highly recommend it. I think it's a great story, and I think Shanine, to what you said, there's a reason that this is one of his most well-known works. And
Mm-hmm.
And we see references to this story in like so many modern things in general, even if it's not the Headless Horseman directly. It's like I'm pretty sure it's been featured, or like the idea of the Headless Horseman, obviously. Scooby Doo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's obviously an episode regarding that, and probably one of the more iconic Halloween episodes was probably, I think, if I remember correctly, was a Headless Horseman episode.
Well, and there's someone here in Estes Park where, so downtown has a big trick or treating thing every year, and there's someone who owns horses who will every year dress up as a headless horseman and walk around downtown on one of their horses. So they are literally the headless horseman, and it is great. And they've literally desensitized their horse to that costume so that they can do it as like a Halloween tradition and it's fantastic. And I wish I had a picture because it's one of the best things I've ever seen.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
really cool.
I want to get a horse just to do that. I'm just kidding.
Good luck.
I mean, I live in Montana. I can buy a horse pretty easily.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about your handling a horse.
I can handle a horse. I've grown up in Montana. I've helped friends break horses before.
Have fun.
No, I'm good. I don't got enough time for that. Ain't nobody got time for that.
Alrighty. On that note, we are chatting about having another watch party. I guess stay tuned in our Discord for that. There is a Jeff Goldblum version on YouTube, FYI. So,
Oh, yeah, we talked about that. That's right.
so yes.
I read that. I saw
Stay
that.
Stay tuned. And our November book club will be taking place on November 19th, and we will be reading Advent, A Thread in the Night by E.M. Welcher. Ta-da, this is what it looks like.
Oh, you have a physical copy?
I do, I bought it.
Oh,
That's a good reason to have a physical.
I mean, that's a
copy.
good copy. That's a good.
There
I was like, I don't know where I'd find this.
It is available on Amazon.
you go.
It is
Amazon.
an excellent Advent book with contemplations, I guess,
Mhm.
for every day in December leading up to Christmas. I highly recommend it. It is not your typical Advent book. Looking forward
Yeah.
to talking about it next month.
Yeah, and we're doing it in November so that we can kind of talk about it, and people can be, if they want to, then do it in December. They can. So
That's why we chose to, because also
yeah.
we do have the book picked out for December. If you want to get a jump start on that, we're doing The Letters from Father Christmas by Tolkien. And I'm so stoked for this story. I love
Yay.
these stories so much. I haven't
Our
even
first
finished it.
Tolkien.
Yay.
And it's like the easiest Tolkien ever because it's
Yeah.
letters from Father Christmas. So it's just letters that he wrote to his children. But I am so excited for this.
And I'm excited. I started reading like the first part of the Advent book already, and so I'm really excited about that. And I think it'll be good for us to get a good Jesus-y talk into.
Mm-hmm.
Yay, Jesus.
Also for Tolkien, everyone start practicing their voices because for the letters from Father Christmas, you need to have voices ready.
Oh, we're gonna do like full like audiobook style.
Oh yeah.
Great.
Like
Maybe not.
multiple
but,
voices?
Huh?
Or
Character
just
voices.
like a Santa Claus voice.
Well, so there's Father Christmas, there's the
Mhm.
polar bear, and there's an elf that writes letters in these stories. So there's multiple characters throughout these that are writing letters to
Oh
his
my
children, and they also have like little footnotes. Sometimes some of them add footnotes to the letters that Father Christmas is sending too. So it's like there's multiple voices on any given letter too.
I'm excited. I've never heard of this one, so I'm rather thrilled to be reading it.
Yeah, same. The more you tell me about it, the more delightful it sounds.
Yeah.
I'm so excited.
Sounds like the kind of book I would have loved as a kid.
We should also mention, like, in this story, in his book, like these, it's he also tests out the early editions of the Elvish used in Lord of the Rings and in Middle Earth lore. So
You're
we
giving
get,
Well,
it all
'cause-
away before we get to December.
I know,
Didn't-
but I'm
well-
not telling you. It's like I'm just saying what to expect. Okay, I'm
Didn't
done.
Lord of the Rings originate as a story that he was telling his kids at bedtime? Or is that just a rumor I heard? Like he started it like the way he came up with the concept was he
I
was
think
like,
maybe The Hobbit.
okay. Then
Like,
again, I
more
feel
so
like
The
that's
Hobbit.
how
Like in
Okay.
a sense, he told these fantastical stories, and he just ultimately
Okay.
really developed the world of it. But Lord of the Rings itself was written as a major project. And so I mean, like, a lot of
Right.
things, maybe I would say it's more so the other way. Like, he used inspiration from his work to tell stories to his children,
Yeah.
more so than he used the stories he's telling his children as inspiration for his work.
Mm-hmm.
Just thinking about who Tolkien was, like, I think that was probably more the bigger way that he approached his writing.
And we'll talk about that more in December.
Exactly.
Yay.
Yeah. Or after the show too.
Yeah.
But let's close up the show.
Yes. Before we just go off into
All
a whole
right.
different book. So, like,
3 hours
All right.
later.
And this was our book club on The Legend of Sleepy Hollow. We are First Geek 411. You can find us on all the social medias and our PlayStation community. Join our Discord server to have more rabbit trail conversations like this. Email us at 1stgeek411@gmail.com. Watch us live on Twitch on Mondays and find us on YouTube. Rate and subscribe on Spotify, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, and Google Podcasts. And check out our website at onegeek411.com. And also go listen to our sister podcast, Faith, Trust, and Pixie Dust, for all things Disney. I'm Shanine at the Hoot and Howl on Twitter and Hoot and Howl Tales, TALES, on Instagram.
I am not prepared with an eye on pretty much all medias at this point.
I'm Humar Whittle.
And I'm not so foreign.
Happy Halloween!
Ooh.
Freaking bats.
Wash your hands.
Look at all those chickens. I don't know what that